Pro Group Management. Workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, we have a great discussion with Bryan Wachter, Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs of the Retail Association of Nevada, and Mike Draper, partner with Argentum Partners, here for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Meantime, here in Nevada, we appear to have one of the highest inflation rates in the country.
Soaring prices for gas, food, housing, and construction supplies continue to hammer Nevadans.
Senator Catherine Cortez Masto was the deciding vote for President Biden's multi-trillion-dollar spending spree, sending inflation through the roof and raising gas and grocery prices over 8% on hardworking Nevadans. Tell Senator Cortez Masto to stop voting for reckless spending and start fighting inflation.
This 4th of July weekend, join the Nevada State Railroad Museum, Carson City, for the Great Western Steam Up, a celebration of the Virginia and Truckee Railroad's 150th birthday. Festivities include a narrated pageant of steam locomotion, train rides, food and libations, live music, and more. For tickets and more information, visit GreatWesternSteamUp.com.
Hello, is this D&D Roofing?
Yes, it is. How may I help you?
You did such a great job on my roof. May I speak to the owner?
I am an owner.
Oh, can I speak to your supervisor?
Sure.
How may I help you?
I love your work. May I speak to the owner?
I am an owner. We're all owners. Well, that's why at D&D we work so hard to keep your home safe and sound.
Oh, no wonder.
D&D Roofing and Sheet Metal. Local, employee-owned, here for you.
Retail's impact on Nevada's economy? Enormous. 8,600 businesses, large and small, employing 145,000 workers. And last fiscal year, retail paid tax on nearly $60 billion in sales. We're the Retail Association of Nevada. We support retail, we help it grow, and we mean business.
RANNV.org.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad, a no-holds-barred political forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're delighted to welcome two of our guests here to the program today. Well, actually, we'd welcome all our guests, but we only have two. Bryan Wachter is here. He's Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for the Retail Association of Nevada. And Mike Draper is a partner with Argentum Partners. Pleasure to have you both here.
Good morning, Sam.
Bryan, I wanted to start with you. With all the discussion as we're taping this of people going to the gas station and just having a heart attack at the price of gas, going to the grocery store and seeing the price of food, where do you think this is heading? Where is the public going to move in terms of their spending?
Well, Sam, we've already started to see consumer spending patterns change. We've started to see that even late into Q4 of last year. We're seeing that in terms of purchasers going to grocery brand or store brand goods away from branded goods. We're starting to see a slowdown in terms of consumption in purchasing tangible and digital goods. And that's offset a little bit with an increase in services, but not enough to suggest that consumers are spending in the ways that they have been. We saw consumer confidence tank in May. And we've seen the Fed act somewhat, I think, a little bit late, but aggressively. And so, we've got a monetary problem, and then you have the inflationary psychology problem that consumers are going through. And both of those things are going to continue to compound over the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, now is it because people don't have the money, or they are just rearranging their priorities? Where are we with all the money that they received and were able to save over the last couple of years?
Well, it's no doubt that I think Nevada households and American households currently have more wealth than they've had in many generations. And that's largely due to the influx in benefit payments and stimulus from the federal government. And so we do have an instance where savings rates are a little bit higher, but that doesn't seem to be giving consumers much comfort. And I think that because of that comfort and the inflationary spiral that we're in, consumers are expecting the worst, and they are starting to behave like they're expecting the worst. And that is, when we talk about that inflationary psychology problem, that in and of itself is going to continue to exacerbate the problem.
Okay, now, most people are aware, but at this point in time here, in the middle of June, retailers are thinking about the holiday season and preparing for that. What are they anticipating for the holiday season?
Well, we still have a lot of issues that we have to fix and some kinks in the supply chain that we still have left over from January of 2020. And so we've got retailers now that have inventories that are out of season. I was just reading an anecdote from a shipping company that was talking about how in December they were finally moving Halloween costumes. And so there are many retailers who have inventories that are out of season or not in with demand that we have been currently seeing. And we've been seeing that demand start ebbing. And so there are real inventory problems for retail. And we are, as you said, looking at Christmas and fourth quarter spending now. Those orders typically start arranging in August, and we have yet to see what retailers are actually going to be gearing up for this fall. I think it's a little bit too early to suggest that we know.
Mike, Northern Nevada Business Weekly ran a piece in the last week or so where they talked about car dealers altering the way that they are acting now. In the past, they would have a lot full of hundreds of cars, maybe 1,000 cars. Now, it's all about customer service, helping a customer fill out their online building of their vehicle, and then providing the customer service to help them train them on the vehicle and then service the vehicle. What other areas are you seeing this kind of change going on?
Well, actually, and to not answer your question with a question, that would be a question I was going to ask Bryan is, from a retail standpoint, what lessons have we learned from the last 2 or 3 years? We're seeing China struggle with COVID right now, and the logistics and shipping and supply chain. Are we learning lessons from that? Are retailers learning lessons from COVID? Or are they factoring that in going forward, especially when we could still be dealing with COVID issues around the world and could be obviously dealing with inflation, but supply chain issues, labor shortages, all of that kind of stuff. Are they learning and preparing from that? Or are there lessons to be learned from that?
Not to take away your hosting ability, Sam, but what I would say is that we really never saw a demand or a demand side recession over COVID, right? It was all about the fact that retailers couldn't supply the necessary goods at the quantities that consumers wanted. The service industry couldn't supply their actual services, even though that there was very high demand. And so what we've actually seen since the beginning of COVID is skyrocketing demand, and that gap between the demand and the supply that retail and services are able to provide is where we're finding that inflationary pressure. And so I would say that the lessons that we learned are more to do with on-demand inventory, looking at how we can make sure that our warehouse space, our inventory space is able to adjust to some of these crisis levels. Retail had always prided itself, and we had a very lean supply chain of ordering the exact amount of products that we needed on the store for that set of time period. And so inventory spaces shrunk. And so I think the biggest lessons that we're going to have are in that inventory management. And, the cost of goods in relation to the cost to store that inventory has been up 26% in the last year. And so this is an area that I think we've learned some lessons, and we're going to see some innovation in.
And Mike, that goes really actually dovetails into what I was asking you about the auto industry. And Bryan raised the phrase on-demand inventory. It used to be that people had things in stock and you would order it and they would be able to deliver it. And then we changed to a system where you ordered it and then they made it. And so there was a time lag. Now that time lag has been in the auto industry, for example, 7, 8 months, if you're lucky, if the chips show up. So, other industries are going to be seeing the same kind of results, are they not?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think across the board, every industry is having to learn how to, as Bryan put it, manage their inventory. Labor is a huge issue right now as well. You're seeing restaurants, we work with a lot of restaurants, you're seeing restaurant concepts starting to change to where it's stand up and order, even in really nice restaurants, order at the counter and then go sit down to deal with labor shortages. I think you're going to see across the board industries, we're seeing them learn to operate leaner, operate more efficiently, And really right now supply is chasing demand. And I think as we start to work through some of the labor shortages and logistical issues, that'll catch up. But certainly in the auto industry, you're seeing that. You're seeing that in the home building industry a ton, right? Is the cost of goods, the cost of materials, labor, all factors into our housing crisis. And so as we start to address some of these inventory issues, which I asked that of Bryan because I haven't heard a good answer, and I know that we've got clients and there's so many smart people working on it, but there's not really a good answer yet on how we're going to avoid those issues going forward if there's other issues with COVID or pandemics or wars or any of that kind of stuff, how we're going to deal with supply chain and supply issues that have caused so many issues right now in the auto industry, in the building industry, and the retail industry. So quite frankly, we're seeing everybody's having to adjust. I just haven't seen that there's a great answer yet to how we deal with that.
Well, I think that the word that comes up is creativity. If you look, for example, Bryan, at Tesla, they were able to continue manufacturing cars at a rapid pace because they had people on staff who could rewrite the chips to make them work for the cars. They weren't originally designed to be a certain kind of chip for a certain kind of response, but they made that work. And isn't that where America truly shines, is in creativity?
Well, I think two things to dissect there, Sam, is yes. And I think that creativity is good. I think that's the only silver lining to tough economic times, is some creative destruction in that economic creative process. But I think what we really have to look at here is the consequences of that. So Tesla, they reallocated a certain number of chips, probably not an inconsequential number of chips that weren't designed for that particular supply chain, and moved them from X to Y and over to Tesla. And that was a great solution for Tesla. But my question would be, what supply chain was then disrupted because those chips were moved? And this is where we're getting some of these supply increases, is that there are many actors, many businesses, retailers, many companies that chose to go out and find creative workaround solutions for some of these supply chain problems. When you have retailers cargo lifting goods across the ocean because they needed the product, when you go out and buy your own chips, when you attempt to move outside that traditional supply lane because it's kinked, you're introducing new causes and actions into that supply chain. So all of these things have a compounding action. I think it's great Tesla figured out a solution. I'd really want to know what the other side of that story is, Sam, to really understand the context.
That's a really interesting question, which I don't have the answer to, and we'd love to have somebody on here from Tesla to talk about that. Mike, let me ask you about this, because you've both raised the labor issue, which is, at this point in time, you would have thought that people were starting to run out of money, or at least be concerned that they were delving into their savings to too great a degree and therefore going back to work. Yet the unemployment rates are actually nationwide relatively low, in Washoe County insanely low, not so low in Clark County, but you still can't get people back to work. On the other hand, I'm hearing from construction industry people that even out-of-status workers are making $25 an hour, if you can get them. So what do you make of this conundrum?
Well, I think it's something that, here's where creativity and innovation, and I go back just a second, I think the other part of creativity and innovation is also government regulation, right? I think we've fallen into a trap where government has become an impediment to business and to economic success.
Wasn't it not always the case?
Well, it is. I think, though, it's gotten worse. It's compounded immensely over the last 8 or 10 years, certainly since the last recession. And I think that until we address government regulation and government becomes a body that helps you find a way to yes, as opposed to tells you no unless you can meet a number of different criteria, we're not going to really solve this problem, whether it's logistics and supply chain or it's labor shortage. I think it's fascinating the number of people that retired, that decided COVID was the time to retire. I can speak to that personally. My dad was going to work for another 3 or 4 years and decided right at the start of the pandemic he didn't want to deal with it, and retired on the spot and decided that was the time. Certainly we've read many articles about how many baby boomers decided COVID was the time to retire. The fact that inflation's gone up, and in some areas salaries have matched that and are having to increase, but there was a big article yesterday about how for working moms, the cost of daycare now has gone up, and doesn't match the salaries that have gone up from that standpoint. There's a lot of different issues in our labor shortage. I do think we are seeing businesses be creative in how to solve that, and they're being forced to be innovative on how to solve that, but we have a long ways to go, and I believe this is an area where government regulation can help facilitate both the supply chain and the labor shortage if we start to peel that back and start to create policies that actually enhance business and not are an impediment to business.
Okay, Bryan, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, you know, it concerns me when we suggest things like childcare and housing. The Brookings Institute came out with a recent study on this where we suggest that wages haven't kept up with the cost of X. And I think there's a couple things that are interchangeable there. And I would submit to you that that is a kind of a backwards, wrong way to frame that conversation, because there's some mechanism happening. And I think a government regulation is one of them, but there's some mechanism happening to where the cost of these goods are not reflected in the income levels of our community. And so there needs to be something to suggest that if the average Nevadan household is making $54,000 a year, prices should be commensurate with that. And instead, we seem to be chasing our own tail here, suggesting that if we increase wages, that is suddenly going to allow more affordable childcare or more affordable housing, when we've seen the exact opposite of that happening. And so there needs to be some reality injected into the conversation about the wages in Nevada versus the cost of goods. And, you know, what I would say to, you know, the low unemployment rate is we still have not returned to our labor force participation rate. That is still down. And so we need to look there. And we need to look at, I think Mike's right on single moms and how do we get women back into the workforce, and how do we view childcare as something that can be done. And I think that's a perfect example of an area where government regulation has maybe held things up to an impossible degree. And I'm glad that, you know, Commissioner Kirkpatrick and the County Commission is going to be looking at ways to solve that, because that would, I think, dramatically increase the pool of workers that our economy has to build on.
All right, let's return to that topic when we come back after this break.
The Do It Right guys at Nevada Heating have one mission. Your air conditioner breaks down today. We fix it today. Why sweat for days while your air is down, when Nevada Heating can get the job done today, and you can get cool again? For nearly 50 years, locally owned Nevada Heating has been getting the job done right. Call today at 323-5585 or see us online at nevadaheating.com.
Southwest Specialties has been making the homes and businesses of Nevada beautiful for more than 20 years. Their experienced designers and craftsmen create the walkways, backyards, water features, and a variety of outdoor cooking areas that add curb appeal and value to your investment. Call today or visit them at their website and see how they can make your outdoor spaces special. Southwest Specialties, creative, distinctive, beautiful. Brian Culpa Photography was born in the rolling hills of Massachusetts, and now he can help you experience the stunning beauty of Nevada in a whole new way through the power of flight. Flying has always been a passion for Brian, and at Brian Culpa Photography, he can make your imagination soar. Brian has the creative mind and tools to tell your unique story. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com.
The Nevada Builders Alliance has been protecting the interests of the construction industry for over 50 years.
Our programs save members thousands of dollars every year and allow them to provide much-needed benefits to their employees. Our industry also allows Nevada to grow. If you're thinking about a career in the construction industry, reach out. And if you haven't thought of a career in construction, what are you waiting for? We are the Nevada Builders Alliance.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're enjoying a spirited discussion here with Bryan Wachter, Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for the Retail Association of Nevada, and Mike Draper, partner with Argentum Partners. At the end of that last segment, Bryan, you brought up Marilyn Kirkpatrick wanting to work on issues to get women back into the workforce regarding childcare. What do you see as an appropriate way to do this? Because I agree. I mean, it makes no sense that if somebody's paying getting paid, 15, 16 bucks an hour to be paying $14 an hour for childcare, if they were lucky to get that for one kid, makes any sense.
I think here we have a case of kind of scarcity that can actually be solved. I mean, Sam, I look at the number of people involved in direct marketing campaigns. I look at the number of people who desperately are looking for additional income, but really don't have maybe the tools, the training, or the ability because of their own childcare needs to really take advantage of their skills in the marketplace. And so if we have a group of people that are out there, they're spending their own money, sometimes very much being taken advantage of, this is a pool of workers that can be placed, I think, to use in Nevada's economy. And so we should be looking at ways to encourage folks to go into childcare, make it easier for them to do that. There's talk about providing grants on able to create an atmosphere and an environment where childcare is something that can flourish. But there are ways that we can aggressively entice people to move into this area. And if we can increase the number of childcare positions in Clark County and Nevada, then we should see a decrease in those costs and that affordability. And so there are certainly, I think, actionable steps we can take.
All right, on the other side of that coin, Mike, in the hotel casino industry and hotels across the country, they're looking at cutting back on services like daily room cleaning, room service, things like that. And my concern there is, what happens to hotels? They just become another version of Airbnbs, and we're seeing a big fight now between people who want to run Airbnbs in Clark County, for example, and there's going to be a limit on the number, according to what was going on at the Clark County Commission.
I think, first of all, regardless of what hotels, particularly here in Nevada, our hotel and casino industry, regardless of what services they have to cut back on or decide are services they can cut back on, I think that you'll never be able to replace the hospitality that Nevada casinos provide. I think that we've seen that. We've seen daily room cleaning cut back, but the level, I haven't seen anybody complain about the level of hospitality or customer service that they get at our Nevada resorts. We've always been really good about that. We provide a lot of amenities that an Airbnb doesn't provide. You won't see those cut back. Restaurants, gaming, entertainment options. So I think from a competitive standpoint, you're always going to receive a level of service at Nevada resorts that you won't receive anywhere else. I think that from the standpoint of investment in Nevada compared to Airbnbs, it's important that we protect our Nevada resorts. And I think that looking and making sure that we're limiting Airbnbs and we're protecting the brick and mortar investments, the employment investments that resorts have provided is important. I think it's worth us looking at, and I'm glad that we're doing that.
All right, let's take another break and we'll be right back.
Meantime, here in Nevada, we appear to have one of the highest inflation rates in the country.
Soaring prices for gas, food, housing, and construction supplies continue to hammer Nevadans.
Senator Catherine Cortez Masto was the deciding vote for President Biden's multi-trillion-dollar spending spree, sending inflation through the roof and raising gas and grocery prices over 8% on hardworking Nevadans. Tell Senator Cortez Masto to stop voting for reckless spending and start fighting inflation.
Ahern Rentals began as Signal Gas Station on Las Vegas Boulevard. Founder John Ahern grew the business by offering rentals. His son Don built on John's legacy, growing Ahern Rentals into the largest independently owned American rental company, with 89 locations in 30 states. Don also brought his experience and vision to equipment manufacturing with Extreme Manufacturing and Snorkel. Today, Ahern Rentals continues to bring its family values to a new generation. Learn more at ahern.com.
With Nevada's only transplant center and verified burn center, the science is here. With award-winning cardiologist and the state's only dedicated heart failure clinic, the talent is here. With Nevada's most advanced robotic surgery, the technology is here. And with the Silver State's only designated pediatric trauma center, hope is here. All because we are here. UMC.
Like a traditional handmade basket, retail is woven into the fabric of life in Nevada. From big box to mom and pop, retail supports our communities in countless ways. Jobs for the disabled, team uniforms for kids, help for the elderly, and and so much more. Retail employs over 1 in 10 workers. Retail supports Nevada, and we support retail.
RANNV.org.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers with Bryan Wachter and Mike Draper. So last question here. Bryan, were you surprised at what was a relatively low turnout in the primary?
I was very surprised, Sam. What we had expected was an increase in low propensity voters, given the mail-in balloting process, and we saw that materialize. And I think what shocked me most is that a lot of 4x4 or consistent voters, both on the Democratic and Republican side, decided to stay home. And I think there's going to be a lot of work over the coming months to understand why that happened.
Same question to you, Mike.
I think I was surprised on the surface. I think we get sort of involved. We all obviously work in this field, and so we expected we'd see people energized, they're angry, they're motivated, and then we'd see a turnout. I think when you start to really look at it, though, and I think this will bear out, and obviously this is anecdotal, I think people still feel like that they're not excited to vote for anybody. Right? And they're not motivated to go out. There weren't a lot of candidates that people were really excited to go, motivated to go vote for. Most people were voting against someone. And I'm just not sure that's a motivating factor. I think that people feel helpless, and that regardless of who they vote for, the situation's not going to change. And so I think that we're seeing the results of people being disenfranchised and just feeling like there's nothing's going to change, and there's really no difference.
And that's where we have to leave it. Gentlemen, thank you both very much. A great discussion, and we'll be right back. I'm here at the Carson Valley Inn in Minden with Joey Whitaker, and you've got a lot of convention space and meeting breakout space for people. Tell us about what's available.
Well, we can handle a group up to about 250, and anywhere as small as 10 or 15. So it really depends on what you're looking for, what the customer's looking for. We're open to anything. It's a beautiful drive, and if you live in South Reno, it's probably about 30-35 minutes, so it's real easy to get to. It's not a long way to get away to the Carson Valley Inn.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Truck drivers are some of the hardest working people you'll meet, delivering over 70% of America's freight and 92% of Nevada's. When there's a natural disaster, they're delivering critical supplies to help those communities recover and rebuild. Every sector of the economy and our nation's military rely on truck drivers. So let's take a moment to say thank you. On the open road or city streets, our truck drivers are rolling to make our economy and our nation stronger. Trucking moves America forward.
Nevada Newsmakers Studio is located at the headquarters of the Nevada Trucking Association. Motion and purpose are a truck's greatest virtue.
As always, you can watch Nevada Newsmakers 24 hours a day at NevadaNewsmakers.com. You can also check our archive going back to 2005 on our website. Again, NevadaNewsmakers.com. We'll see you on the next show.